day 20 of my 3D tutorials. We're now halfway in our tutorial series. Last time we discussed about how to import the salt dispenser onto Sketchfab, which is located here. I just need to load up. Do apologise. I showed you how to upload this asset onto Sketchfab. This is the result of that tutorial. I also showed you how it shares, by sharing it onto different social media, how to hook up all the different maps in the settings, so on and so forth. Now, if you join me halfway, in this tutorial series today, you can refer to my website www.andrewbooth.3d.com. Halfway down, my first 4 videos is located here. You can always go to my tutorials page to locate the other tutorials that I've done. If you want to contact me, critiquing your work or advice or anything like that, or if you're looking for a 3D artist for your studio, I'm available. You can contact me on a.booth3d@outlook.com. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitter at AndrewBooth3D. This is my 3D, my actual Twitter account. On here locates all my other past tutorials, my past models and all sorts, and working in progress too. Now, today we'll be talking about Unreal Engine, how to import the salt dispenser onto Unreal Engine 4, and how to the introduction of the actual blueprint system. Now, last time, what I've done between this session is uploaded my Sketchfab onto my website using the share the enabled coding, enabled, and just copy that into Weebly, which now can play this asset in a 3D space, so all of you people can view what I've done, what has been done. Also, I've done a little breakdown of what maps there is. I do this in some of my models. I change it depending on the actual asset. Like this one here, it's a sofa, but I done 4 separate squares and divided it up that way. What I've done here, I got an image, a close-up image. What I've done, I could basically combine each one and cut into it in the different layers to expose the different maps. So here's, a roughness, the normal map, metallic, base, and ambient occlusion. So anyone can look at it and say, okay, this is what these maps look like. And because it's all the same square, just cut up, it's a reasonable size that you can see what's actually going on. A picture like this one, for example, you can see the entire map, all 4 different maps, but there's small square sizes and square that you can't really make out the detail that much, but you can see as a summarize what's actually going on. This one has different, it's not all the same throughout the texture, not like here where you got a whole wood texture and just gold bits going around it. Where here you've got different effects going on, and so on and so forth. Here I also used software used. You can do this. I do it here. I would done it here, but I already stated in my past tweets and in past tutorials what I've used, so it's pointless to show what I've used here to make it. And then it also gives you a chance to explain in like interviews and stuff like that what you use to make it, and explain in person, because when you have something like this it shows what you've done, but when you're actually in an interview there's not much you can talk about, because you already stated that you use Maya, you use Modbox, you already stated that you use Photoshop in that short image. Here it actually gives you a chance, because then they can ask, okay, what did you use to make that? And so you can say, oh, I used Maya for this, I used Substance Designer, I used Sketchfab, I used Photoshop, I used this, I used that. So it depends on what you want to be shown. Also, sometimes it's not always ideal to indicate what you used, especially when you use all the same software throughout, because it's your workflow. It becomes very repetitive, so you must use that space to actually show what really matters, and that's in the actual texture. It's the texture is the thing that matters the most, really. All software is the same, so it's similar. The only thing that is different is its processing power and all the rest of it. So it's processing and the way it's, its look, its aesthetics, the actual, like Modbox is, Maya is slightly different to 3D Max, but it's the same thing, it does the same job. It's just how you use it is different, really. So now I'm now going to jump into Unreal Engine. Launch the latest version. I just upgraded mine to 4.10.4. As you can see, there is a preview here. 4.11 preview 6. I never used the preview. The reason I don't is the Substance plugin here does not it's not compatible for new ones. They only patched it for 4.10 and below. Also, there's always bugs in the previews where they're more ironed out in the 4.10 kind of aspect. So launch it, and this is where you got and yes, this is a wallpaper of the 11th Doctor. I have it there for a reason. Now, as you can see, my default project has loaded up here. It's ball can. It's because I'm working on a side project to making a ball game where you knock down cans and you get points for it, and so on and so forth. I will be showing you how to implement that kind of system. It's just working out things on the blueprint system, but the reason being it's pumping up now despite pressing the launch is because it's set as my default file. So don't worry about it while we wait for that. If you didn't look before, here we are. This Unreal Engine is now opened up, and as you can see, this is my current project. It's nothing much, it's just basically a ball where you can knock down if you play it. I got like a health bar, I got a score system, I got sounds and effect, and so on and so forth. And as you can see, each time I hit a can, it deletes. It actually destroys the actor. That's pretty cool. This is just experiment to see what's been, you know, experiment to see how it works and stuff like that. So when I create something like this, I'll show you how to implement this kind of system and so on and so forth later on stage. But for this, I want to open a new project. We're going to be working from, these are the, we won't be working from a blank project at the moment. Actually no, I changed my mind. I'll be working as a third person, so then you can move about and whatnot. Each one of these is presets with basic coding enabled, you know, to do basic stuff. You know, for the third person, it's basically all the coding for the person to move about, and that's it really. I always start with starter content, so that I always will have a start. So then if there is a code or blueprint or an asset that I don't need but I need it for my game, it's always good to have that. So here you can determine if you're going for mobile or desktop or console. I always keep it to desktop. You can always change at a later date. I always go with maximum quality. So now this is where you deal with your project. So call an appropriate project. So for here it'll be Salt Game. You're probably thinking, okay, later in your in the previous tutorials I said about the salt or the pepper. Well, this one's a pepper. Let's call it pepper game. I remember during the period in the previous tutorials that I'll be making it for the restaurant scene, which I am. I'll open that in a later date. Reason being I'm not putting it in there, I haven't started the project in Unreal. I will do it in a later stage, but I'm trying to get all my components sorted out, all my assets, and then I can just simply click and drag in one big go, you know. I don't have to do drips and drags. The pepper grinder is something that can be added to the scene when it's actually implemented into some designer in Unreal Engine, sorry. So it's all about that really. Now here, this one, the folder is where you put all your projects. I always stick mine in the Unreal projects so you know where it is. So keep like that and create project. And as it creates it, it shuts down the current project and reopen it. As you can see, it's named it as Pepper Game, just like I called it. And now it's just loading up. It may take time to load up for the first time. As we wait, I want to show you, this is the actual textures that was used to make the salt or pepper grinder. As you see, that's the roughness, normal. I could have shown this bit off, that's more interesting, but I wanted to put the colour there. It's more suitable, have the colour there. I suppose I could put a normal map here on the edge here. So now it's all a case of what you want, basically. As you can see, the project window just went down and it's loaded. This is what you get when you open a new project. It's blank. You've got a couple of objects in the actual environment. You have a man that can walk and run. If I play it, got a man that can do basic movement, can run around like so. You know, it's got a spinny question mark here. It can go up the stairs and all sorts. It's got basic code on it to enable you just to move, as you can see. Now, how to move in the engine, you can click Alt, middle button, and it allows you to pan around the scene. The left click is to rotate, as you can see, and the right button zooming out and in. You can also use the directional buttons up and down, left and right, and alternatively you can use a third person shooter kind of. You can use a third person shooter keys if you want, and here it is basically, and a blank project. So to get started, what I tend to do, I always start with a new folder, and I always call this assets. So all my assets and its blueprints will be contained in here. Then import. It'll bring up the contents page, because that's what we viewed last. What you do, you locate your FBX file, which is, if I remember rightly, we have one in the actual salt folder. So I got to locate it. Here it is. Here's salt FBX, and this will come up. This has FBX importation options, so we can either import it as a Skeletor, which we don't need it. That's more for like Skeletor kind of objects, you know, like a chain or a person, you know. Auto generation of occlusion, I always tick that off because we, as it stands, don't need it. We don't actually need it generated yet. I always like to redo that. And we just go through what we need and what we don't need. This is to import the actual SYNC kind of translations, you know, like its scale and stuff like that, or you can do it informal, uniform scale. Import material and textures. And does import all, and this is what you get left with. This is the actual model. The reason being it's got the normals is because we had a texture, a normal map attached to the original FBX, so it dragged that along with it. So now this is what it looks like. This is the actual model. So now we had to deal with collision. Collision is like a binding box. It's like a box or an object wrapped around your model. It's see-through, so you can't see in game, but it prevents your character to overlap it. You can set a collision box where your player can overlap, but then you can call it, so you can say, okay, when your player overlaps, it does this action, it does that action. So that's what we don't do. So click on occlusion, and then we have the options: auto occlusion, simple, 26 dpo occlusion. Let's basically talk about the amount of geometry on the actual collision. And if you look at it, this is what that generates. It's standard, it's pretty good, but it's boxy too, which means it's not very good for what we need. So undo that. For an object like this, I always use auto occlusion and bring up this box here. So I always go to about 20 and increase the accuracy, apply, and it just generates the occlusion. Don't always use the auto occlusion because it can be costly in performance. Only use it when it's necessary, and this is what the occlusion brings up. It's tightly packed into the model, which is what is needed. Perhaps lower the accuracy slightly. And they are quite good occlusion. So now it's got a pretty good occlusion map onto it. And that's one thing you need to do, is save the actual object. Once it's saved, you can import the actual substance file. So go to your root of the file folder, like so, and I saved mine in the substance folder, and here it is, the SBSA file. Open it, and it'll bring up this file. Create a default instance, always click that on, and it'll bring on an instance of the actual material and the actual material itself to import, and it would take some time. And this is the material. When you open up the actual material in the material editor, as you can see, because of the substance designer, it being an archive, it's already packed all my materials and hooked them up into the proper slots, and it creates a nice little material out of it. So save it. So when you go back into the actual asset, you can then drop down the menu and find the asset, like here, and there you are. Here's the material. and save it. But you can always click and drag it into the world. Like so. But we scaled it so it's correct because we scaled it so it fit in his hand. We don't want it any bigger than that. And it's good. So what I do, I always go to create blueprint and add this asset to it. So you click on the where your location, call it salt blueprint, and now it's created the asset as it's created the asset as a blueprint now. What I always like to do, I like to add component and add a scene component. So now it should unlock all the transform aspects. So now I can determine its location, its rotation, and its scale, so on and so forth. Compile and save. The variable name for this is salt. It's actually pepper mesh. Compile. For this is I would say that this is actually the correct size because we sized it to the scaler, because a pepper can't be too big because it has to be fit in your hand. It's an average size, so it's in proportion, it's correct, but for presentation purposes I'm going to make it bigger. So I'm going to make it 2 by 2 so we can actually see what's going on. So just click and drag it into the world, and even then you can't actually see what's going on. So we open it up and I'm going to make it 10 by 10 by 10. And as you can see, because we did it, it's sized it in the actual editor, in game. That's too big, so I'm going to reduce it down to 6 by 6 by 6. I know it's massive size for the scale, but I've done it so we can see in the actual world what it looks like and what we actually do in using code. This is just for presentational purposes. You don't have to make it this big, but you can see the material. Now, another thing I want to stress to you, the lighting on here is incorrect. The reason I say that is because you have to build lighting. So lighting quality, preview, always do preview at first and build preview and click preview, and now it's now exporting the light map and now building the lighting based on the data that it's entered. So it's now recalculating all the lighting rays, you know, how it bounces on the object, you know, subsurface and scattering and all sorts. So now the lighting effect on this asset is now correct. So go back into it, compile. In here is the actual graph. This is the coding graph. You see, Substance Designer, I've been using Substance Designer for the past tutorials for so long. I've got a habit of saying it. Unreal Engine 4 uses C++ as a default code. Now, this graph is a visual scripting version of that code of C++. So if you, off the bat, don't know much about coding, but you know basics, you can visually script your code and build the game from scratch from that code. Now, if you're new to C++, C++ uses variables. You know, you get reference to it. It's like a communication. So you start with an event, and from that event you call all your codes out. You ask questions to the request. You request information and questions to the receiver. Then the receiver sends back information back to you for information, and it's a continuing communication line, just like you would in any kind of relationship, actually. You know, and this is what you do. If you remember rightly, I was telling you about a float is a variable between 0 to 1. Well, this is what this is talking about. If you add a variable, you have Boolean, which is always true and false. You have a float, which I told you in the last past tutorials in Substance Designer, where we expose the parameters. Well, a float is varies between 0 to 1, but it goes up in points, so 0.1, 0.2. An integer is like a float, but it does a whole number, and so on and so forth. And it's basically you use referencing off every object, every code that you do, and call it out and say, hey, I want you to do this code. I want you to do this. You know, I'm now going to show you an example of that using an event tick. An event tick is an event that you tell the computer, okay, I want you to manipulate my model every frame by doing this, So you can click from the execution pin. This here is an execution pin. This is what fires off the execution, and you can only do it one by one at a time. You cannot have multiple executions of the same event, if that makes sense. So you click and drag it off. You type MakeRotator. As you can see, it doesn't pop up because we haven't told it to. It's locked itself out. So you can get it by clicking off and then MakeRotator, like so. From here you can rotate it. I can't remember how I've done it now. From here, even as you can see, it's so much you can do. It's kind of like, okay, where did we start off? That's right, delta. No, it won't come from there, it's come from here. Delta rotator, here it is. As you can see, sometimes it's not easy to create what you're after. What am I after? You get, first of all, get a reference, so you get the pepper mesh. Add relative rotation, delta rotation, they are. And then this is where you got to think, in Unreal Engine 4 it goes roll, pitch and yaw. Basically it's X, Y and C. So here promote to variable. So this will be speed, compile, set this to 100 for example, and then click and drag this and then get and hook it up into the X, compile it and play it. No, that didn't work. As you can see, blueprints is not the most easiest things. You had to think about what you're doing. Set speed. See if that works. As you can see, it's rotating it, but it's on the wrong axis. So as you can see, it's actually working. The reason it didn't work before is because we actually hooked up the speed here, and we're setting it, and then we was putting it through the actual X. So it's not the actual X we need to do. We need to do it in the Y then. If it's not the Y, that means it's got to be the X. 100 is too small, too big, so make it to 30. Save here and press play. You can see now it working. It's doing what it's been told to do. It's rotating it on the actual X, the C value. So 10, play. Still too big, too large. So let's make this 4. There we are. So now we made the actual asset to rotate. So if we go through the code, this is what's actually been executed. If we go through what we've done, we said, okay, let's add a relative rotation to the tick, and the target will be the pepper mesh. And then through the rotation, make it rotate on the Z axis by the value of 4. This is a simple code, C++ code. So then, if you think about it, we are now saying to the event, hey, get the pepper mesh, ask the rotation to rotate on X value, by 4, and this is what it's all about: getting your reference, requesting information, and giving out instructions, calling out instructions, because we called out reference from the pepper mesh and rotating it. And this is what we're doing, and it's using, and it's on every tick. Now, if we wanted to, what we could do, we can then when it collides with the actor. So let's say event big actor overlap. So first of all, you've got to cast to third person character. So then we're going to say, wait a minute, and then if, and then destroy actor. So basically what I'm saying is event actor, so if an other actor, if it's a third person, destroy this actor. So now when you play it, as you can see, it doesn't work. Because we got no code set. This casting is to cast to the actual other actor. So perhaps if we take this away, so if it's been destroyed actor, that should work. Well, it's not working at the moment, but you get the idea. You use blueprints to call out codes, instructions to do some, like make it rotate. Today, I think I will leave the tutorial here. Tomorrow, we'll be touching into actually destroying the pepper grinder, adding points, a point system. So every time the actor touches and collide with the salt grinder, it's gonna, it's gonna do something. Thank you for watching me, and do follow me and join me tomorrow. Thank you.